So I would consider myself a Joe or an Amy March, but according to my friends, I may be wrong. Hi, my name's Caroline May Woodson, and you are listening to I May Be Wrong, But. And this week we are talking about a quote from Little Women. First of all, on the broader scale, if you're with us last month, my first month of episodes, we were talking all about quotes that had to do with beginnings and starting. And so this month, being that it's October, which is my favorite month, we are going to be talking about spooky things like fear and being scared, just things in that genre, because we can. And I love October, and I hope you do too. It's also my birth month. That's why it's quite so important, I would say. Not really, I'm just kidding there. But anyway, our quote of the day is, "I'm not afraid of storms, for I'm learning how to sail my ship." And that is by Louisa May Alcott, and it's from Little Women, and Joe says that in the book. So obviously I'm a writer, so growing up and when I was a kid and I saw the older versions of Little Women, I always thought I was a Joe, and don't you always see yourself as a main character, right? No one sees themselves as the evil stepmother in Cinderella. No one sees themselves as the villain in their own story. You always see yourself in a certain light. So anyway, growing up, I really thought I was a Joe. Then as I got older, I could see the ways in which I was an Amy, especially when the new movie came out, the Greta Gerwig one, because I love Florence Pugh, but I am deeply romantic. I am an artist. I want all of these things. So I could see how I could be a mix between the two. And I asked my friends, oh, what March sister do you think I am? And one of my dear friends, he had been in the musical Little Women, and so he was very aware, unlike most dudes, I would presume. And so I asked him, expecting to get either Joe or Amy, and he decided to tell me that I'm Meg. He thinks I'm Meg. And I was like a little offended at the time. And so I went through, in case you aren't familiar, and I wrote down little adjectives for each. So Meg is supposed to be the eldest of the sisters. She's kind and gentle, but also longs for the comforts and luxuries of a wealthy life, which she doesn't end up with. She's a maternal figure. She's like a mom. So her adjectives were traditional, domestic, kind, caring, maternal, nurturing, sentimental, graceful, and pretty. Some of those adjectives are nice. A lot of them are. So it wouldn't be the worst thing if I was Meg. But the sister who goes off and gets married and has the kids, and it was interesting to me that one of my friends decided that was who I was, not one of the ones who goes after her writing career or who goes off to Paris to study art. And I'll go through all the rest of the sisters just in case you need a refresher. So Jo is the second sister, fiery, intelligent, independent tomboy who dreams of being a famous writer. Very loyal to her family. She rebels against societal expectations, very strong-willed, bit of a temper. So she's independent, ambitious, fiery, headstrong, loyal, brave, tomboyish, unconventional, creative, and passionate. Now, I'm not a tomboy, so definitely wouldn't fall into that category, but the rest of them, I feel like. Beth is the third sister, who's famously shy, gentle, and kind-hearted. She's quiet. She's the moral hub of the family, I would say, known for her love of dolls, very modest, plays the piano, sweet, gentle, modest, pious, pure, kind-hearted, selfless, quiet, sensitive. And then there's Amy, and Amy is the youngest sister, who is initially a bit spoiled and childish. She has a strong artistic sensibility and a love for beauty and refinement. As she matures, she becomes more graceful and learns to navigate social circles with charm, eventually finding a way to balance her artistic ambitions and her comfortable life. So she's charming, elegant, vain, sentimental, practical, poised, dainty, refined. And anyway, it's just funny to see who you think you are versus who your friends think you are. And I, being a writer and like a person who's constantly in my head, I would say I typically have a good understanding of who I am. But I guess I ask you now that I just read all those, like, which one do you think you are? Or maybe ask your friends tonight. Fun little question for the group chat. But back to our quote of the day. We're talking about Little Women. We're talking about, "I'm not afraid of storms, for I'm learning how to sail my ship." And now I'm going to give you some fun facts on Miss Author, Miss Louisa May Alcott. So the original title of Little Women was not Little Women. The first volume of the book was published in 1868, and it was called Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. And it was actually 2 volumes at first. The sequel was called Good Wives, and that came out in 1869. And now they were almost always published together, but many early English editions of the book ended with the first part, and British readers would have to purchase a sequel to continue the story. Fun fact about Louisa, she was the very first woman to vote in Concord. So she was a very strong abolitionist, a strong supporter of women's suffrage. When a law was passed in Massachusetts in the 1870s allowing women to vote in local elections, Alcott immediately registered and cast her vote, becoming the first woman in Concord. The weird thing is I'm actually working on a play right now about women's suffrage. I am the lead producer for a theater company called Pipeline Playwrights, and we're putting on this play, an original play by Ann Timmons. It's called It's My Party, and it's about the passage of the 19th Amendment. So apparently there's a lot of suffrage going on in my life right now. But more on Louisa. She was not an overnight success. So Little Women did really well, but her career had been building to that for years, right? She worked all the time. She was teaching. She was also a seamstress and a governess to support her family. She published poems and short stories in magazines. And her first big success was a fictionalized account of her Civil War nursing experience. And that was titled Hospital Sketches. And that was in 1863. Now, this is my last fun quote about her, and it's a little bit of a crazy one. This is something I'd never heard of. So her father had a commune, and it was a disaster. It was called Fruitlands, and it was a short-lived transcendentalist commune, and it was a complete failure. So her father, who was Bronson Alcott, had idealistic but impractical ideas, and it led to the family nearly starving. And so Louisa later wrote a satirical account of that experience, and it was called Transcendental Wild Oats, and it was highlighting the absurdity and hardship of the venture. But I do feel like, you never wish this upon anybody, but I feel like growing up in a commune would give you plenty of things to write about. Like, I grew up in a church that my family ended up leaving, and I'm still religious, I'm Christian, but it's funny today, and I will say I do a lot of writing about some of the experiences I had early on, and I think growing up in a scenario that not everyone does, it leads you to a lot of good stories, which is perfect for us writers. For those of you who don't know, I've been talking a lot about it. Little Women is a classic novel. It's about coming of age. It's about this family of sisters, the March sisters, and they're growing up during and after the Civil War. And there recently was a new rendition, what do you call that? A new making of the movie, and it was directed by Greta Gerwig, who, of course, I love Greta Gerwig, a writer, director, woman. But the versions of Little Women that I could find on the internet, at least like the widely accepted ones, in 1917 and 1918, two silent film versions were made, but they're now considered lost. A lot of stuff was before we came into these awesome little tiny smart chips that can hold so much information. Then in 1933, Katharine Hepburn played Jo March, and this was the first talkie version, and it was a huge success, did super well. Then in 1949 was the first Technicolor adaptation, and this film starred June Allison as Jo and a young Elizabeth Taylor as Amy. Then in 1994, this was like a beloved modern version. You've probably seen it with Winona Ryder as Jo and Susan Sarandon, I might be saying that wrong, as Marmee, and Christian Bale as Laurie. And then in 2019, this is the one I was talking about, directed by Greta Gerwig. Saoirse Ronan was Jo, Florence Pugh was Amy, Emma Watson was Meg, and it was fantastic. If you haven't seen that one, I highly recommend it. So we're talking about our quote of today. I'm not afraid of storms, for I'm learning how to sail my ship. I really like this quote. Of course, I pulled it because we're looking for fear and that sort of thing. But I like the idea of not being afraid when bad things happen, because it's teaching you how to live. And I had this chorus teacher in 8th grade. Her name was Mrs. Schick, and Mrs. Schick taught us the only thing you can expect is the unexpected. And she would say that all the time. It was like her tagline in the class. And at first, when people start to coin a catchphrase for themselves, it's annoying. You're like, oh my gosh, would you shut up? Like, we get the point that you want that to become your thing. But then it becomes endearing. It's almost like when you hear a song on the radio and at first you hate it, but then you hear it so many times you love it. And so I came to really like that she said that. And I really hate the idea of the unknown, but I like this idea that, oh, when you get to go into the unknown, you're learning how to live. I think it's a nice reframing. Being that we've talked so much about the modern remake, I did want to share a quote from this version. This is Amy's monologue, and I would do this monologue all the time when I was auditioning for things. And for my senior film class, I had my boyfriend at the time. We did this as like my final scene presentation. So I'm not going to hardcore act it for you or anything, but I'll read it for you. So this is from Amy. I'm not a poet. I'm just a woman. And as a woman, I have no way to make my own money. Not enough to earn a living or support my family. And if I had my own money, which I don't, that money would belong to my husband the moment we got married. And if we had children, they would be his, not mine. They would be his property. So don't sit there and tell me that marriage isn't an economic proposition, because it is. It may not be for you, but it most certainly is for me. That's a monologue. It doesn't go along with our first quote at all. I just think it's so good. I think it's so good. I can't imagine being a boy and sitting there and the girl saying that to me. I think I'd never speak again. I think it's so well written, and I think it's so true. Just a little modern Amy for you. But we've been talking a lot about Little Women, so why don't we move on? First up, this is one of my, I would call it like a key book, like it unlocked something for me. I don't know, key book doesn't really have a ring to it. I was hoping it would when it came out of my mouth. But I love this book. It's My Mad Fat Diary. And I think this was my junior year of high school. We had to read different genres every quarter. You could read as many books as you wanted, but you had to get at least one nonfiction, one fiction, one poetry book. There were these categories, but you had to read a certain amount of books. You could choose how they fell, but you had to get at least one in each section. And I, at the beginning of this, we wrote, what kind of things do you like to read? And at the end of the year, my teacher asked the same question. This was a genius thing to do. And it really turned on my head what I like. And I did not realize until I read this book and the others how much I loved a memoir. So My Mad Fat Diary is by Ray Earl. And it is literally this girl's diary. It's literally her diary. She changed a few names for privacy purposes, and she probably cut out a few things she didn't want all of us to read, but she just published her diary. She was a girl who was overweight, struggling with self-confidence and figuring out life. I read it in high school, and it was life-changing for me. I couldn't put it down. Every page, I was like, oh my God, I feel like that. Oh my gosh, I felt that. I've thought that before. Oh my goodness, I see the world that way. So I love this book. There is a TV show, actually. I have not seen it though, but I do this where when I really love something, I get scared to watch a remake of it because I'm scared it's gonna ruin it for me. And I'm sure the TV show is great. I haven't heard anything bad about it. I just get scared because I love the book so much. But the quote that kind of goes along with what we were talking about with Miss Jo is, it's all right to be scared. It's what you do when you're scared that matters. I just think it's very plainly written, not in a way that it's dumb, but in a way that's really honest. And something my writing teachers tried to tell me early on is that when you use too many words, it seems like you're trying too hard. And I was like, I have all these words, they should be on the page. And I believed that all my long sentences were more so like Absalom, like very Faulkner-esque. I didn't realize that there's such power in being able to have a short sentence that's really impactful. So I think that's really good, but I have some other quotes for you from it. People always talk about the darkness and the light, but what if there's a third place? A place when you're not happy, but you're not sad either. You're just somewhere else. And another one for you. Fatness, for me, is the physical evidence of all my failures. Oh, that one's tough. That one's tough. I've always had the weird thing with my body image. Who knows what it's from? I'm not here to psychoanalyze myself today. But I do think it can be hard when you're a perfectionist, a type A person, and there's something that people can see about you that makes it seem like you quote unquote failed. And I think is something I've had trouble with weight, and I never really realized it till I read that quote. That's why I really don't like that people can see what I look like, because to me, it was like, oh, I'm failing, but your weight isn't failing, right? Anyway, okay, next quote. The only good thing about dating is telling people you're dating. Man, was she on to something. I will say I have suddenly become the only single one of my friends, really, and all of my friends are like, oh my gosh, Caroline, what's going on? What's going on? And I weirdly had two guys I don't know follow my private Instagram this week, and one of them started trying to message me. And just like crazy things happen to you, and it's not fun. Like, it's not really fun while it's happening, to be honest with you. Most of the times it does not go well, and people are not always nice, but boy, is it fun to talk about. Boy, is it fun to talk about. This weekend, my friends and I went to a new bar. It was so cool. I would love to go back. It was a cowboy themed bar. And downstairs, there's live country music. And upstairs, there's a DJ, and you can ride the bull. And there's like an outside porch, and you can take photos in the photo booth. And they have the margarita glasses with the little cacti on the bottom. And they had some bomb looking food that I would love to go back for. It was so adorable. So we all had been standing there being like, oh my goodness, are we going to talk to a boy? Is a boy going to talk to us? We're just standing there. These were my single friends, actually, surprisingly enough. And the second those two leave me to go inside, a man comes right up to me. We ended up talking, and it was nice. Like, we talked for a little bit. He seemed normal. He seemed remotely funny, very intelligent. And he was cute. Yeah. And he asked for my number at the end. I gave him my number. He texted me that night asking if I wanted to come over, and I replied, I'm not that kind of girl, sorry, because it's not really my thing. And he texted me back in the morning, and he was like, oh, I didn't realize you're not into heart-to-hearts and leftover pizza. It's a bit disappointing. And I was like, sure, buddy, that's exactly what you meant when you asked me to come over. And that's a great story to tell now. It's just like very funny, but it's not super fun when it happens to you. Anyway. And the last quote was, if you love something, let it go. And if it comes back to you, it was probably meant to be. Unless you let it go because you're being a psychopath, then maybe just leave it alone. Oh, she's so funny. She's so funny. So I think my Mad Fat Diary, it's really hilarious. She's got such a good sense of humor, but it's also very raw and real. And it talks about like body image and just how tough it is. It like physically and mentally hurts to grow up. Next up, our main quote of the day made me think about one of my all-time favorite songs, and it is Aphasia by Pinegrove. And this song was my song when I went to college. It still is my favorite song to this day of all time. I cannot skip it if it comes on. I went to theater school, as you all know, and some wackadoo things happen in theater school. You have some wackadoo teachers, and I had this one teacher. I can't even remember his name. I can picture his face right now. I had him for my freshman acting class. And just to set the scene for you, we walked in one day, and when you're a freshman, you want everyone to like you. You want to do everything right. So you are literally willing to look as dumb as possible in order to gain some friends, because you're living in a new state, living in a new apartment, dorm, by yourself. You will do anything to make a friend, right? And in theater school, where we had to wear blacks. So imagine this, I'm in head to toe black, yoga pants that I've had since I was 13, turtleneck, black sneakers, black socks, black scrunchie in my hair. And all of my friends post up to class in all blacks. It looks like the SNL skits. I'm not even kidding. We're just walking around campus all the time in all black outfits. It's ridiculous. I can't even imagine doing that now. But so we post up in our blacks, and he was like, okay, everyone, sit on the floor in a circle. And in the middle of the circle, there are three. There's him, and then there's a bowl with a bunch of scraps of paper. And then there's one of those like things that is like a bowl with like almost like an avocado masher, but like you use it to ring around the sides to make the bowl ring. Ringing bowl. I don't know what those are called. They have a nice name. And so our teacher has decided that we are each going to pull a little card out of the center bowl, and whatever the word is on it, you have to tell a story about that. And you just have to talk for 5 minutes straight. And then after each person, we'll cleanse the room by doing the little bowly thing. And I was like, okay. But then he tells us all the words are what he calls trauma triggers. And they are going to be heavy. So we're going to be talking about some heavy things. So the word I pulled was loss. Loss. And you just have to tell a story that's true from your life on that. And that is what I would call trauma bonding. I would say after that class, my classmates and I were a lot closer, but I don't know if that's necessarily healthy. Anyway, so this guy, I'm getting to my point, I swear. This guy was an odd guy, my teacher, and he told us that we needed to make a routine before every audition, that no matter what we did, before every audition, you need to do these things, and it will get you in the right mindset to act and to perform. And one of his things that he does before an audition is he has to lay on the floor in child's pose. He has to. And so he was telling us he showed up to this audition and they tried to put him right into the room. And it was in this scary old building. There was no holding room. There was just an audition room. So there wasn't a place he could do that while he waited with his binder or whatever. And so he asked if he could use the restroom before he went in. And he said it was the dirtiest public bathroom he's ever been in, but he still got on the floor and got into child's pose. Can you imagine laying on the floor of a dirty bathroom in child's pose? No. I'm not doing that. Anyway, so this guy told us we needed to make a pre-audition ritual, and Aphasia, because it was my favorite song at the time and still is, became my ritual. I would listen to Aphasia and I would stretch before every audition. I'd have it either in my earbuds, or if I was going to my audition, I'd listen to it in my room before I left. And yeah, so I'm gonna read some quotes for you from it. So satisfied, I said a lot of things tonight. So long, Aphasia, and the ways it kept me hiding. It's not so much exactly all the words I used, it's more that I was somehow down to let them loose. Just when I thought I had this pattern sorted out, apparently my ventricles are full of doubt. Now, things go wrong sometimes, don't let it freak you out. But if I don't have you by me, then I'll go underground. This is my favorite part. One day, I won't need your love. One day, I won't divide myself by the one I'm thinking of. And if one day I won't need it, then one day you won't need it. Oh, again, my readings do not do justice, so you should go and listen to it, Aphasia by Pinegrove. But just so you know, aphasia is also a psychological word, and the definition of that is aphasia is a language disorder that results from damage to the brain, typically caused by a stroke. It affects a person's ability to communicate, impacting their speaking, writing, and understanding of language. The condition does not affect intelligence, rather it's a breakdown in the brain's ability to process language. And so this whole song is about being scared to say something and not being able to communicate it and then finally letting that fear go. It's not necessarily talking about the actual psychological disorder, just the concept. And I thought that aligned with our quote today of it's okay to be scared because one day it will go away. But that is aphasia. Okay, this is my third recommendation for you, and that is Ted Lasso. I don't know how we haven't talked about this already. I swear I'm gonna run out of favorite things to tell you about, but Ted Lasso, the first season of that show, is one of the best things I've ever seen in my entire life. When I was told about Ted Lasso, if you haven't seen it, put it on your must-watch list. It's on Apple TV. They do great quality TV. My friend Alex told me about it, and she described it to me, there's this guy and he's a football coach, but he gets recruited to be a soccer coach. They call soccer in the UK football, and then he goes over there and he coaches it. That's what happens. She accurately described the show for sure. But when someone tells you that, that doesn't sound like my cup of tea. I am a girl who loves sweet little girly comedy about these girl best friends and one of them falls in love, and I'm a girly girl through and through. And of course, Alexandra is a wonderful athlete in her own. I could never be as fast as she is ever in my life. So I was like, oh, maybe she just likes it because it's like sporty. She played soccer. No, it's absolutely amazing. And I do have to say, I think the reason why it's so good is something we don't do a lot anymore. The main character is such a good guy. Of course, he makes some mistakes later on, but especially in season one, he really doesn't, from what I remember. And I think we don't have a lot of TV nowadays where it's actually a good person. I want to root for good people. Not everybody has to have a secretly bad side. We all make mistakes, duh. But I love watching good people succeed. You want to root for the underdog, especially the underdog who has a southern accent and jokes falling out of his pockets. Like, you want to root for him. My quote that kind of aligns with what we're talking about today is actually from the character Sam in the show, and it goes, to try is scary because you can end up losing a lot, but you have to put your heart out there. Sam is a sweetheart, but I have a few more quotes from me from the show just because we have to. I promise you, there is something worse out there than being sad, and that's being alone and sad. They meant something with that one. And my last one for you is, taking on a challenge is a lot like riding a horse, isn't it? If you're comfortable while you're doing it, you're probably doing it wrong. And I think that also aligns with what we're talking about today. The idea that, like, you should do hard things in your life. You know what, actually, I do want to talk about that. I think that nowadays, everything is made really easy for us, right? Like if I don't feel like going to the grocery store, maybe it's raining or it's Sunday and it's going to be so busy, I can have somebody else do that for me and it'll show up at my door. Or, oh, you know what? I want to go out with my friends, but my car's in the shop, but I don't want to ask someone to drive me. I'll just take an Uber. Right? And I can get that order to my door. It'll be here in 4 minutes. Or I want to watch a movie. I don't have to go to the movie theater anymore, plan a time, buy a ticket. I could just turn on my TV and I have all this stuff right there. We work in a world where things are at your fingertips. And that's what I do in my day job anyway, making money be at your fingertips. But everything wasn't meant to be easy. Your life is supposed to be figuring out how to do hard things and overcoming them, and figuring out how to do easy things. Not everything has to be hard. I'm not saying that. But the little things in life, like sometimes I don't feel like cooking, and if I go out to dinner with my friends, great, I'll eat leftovers for the next day or so. But learning how to be good at making an omelet, it's not like it's hard or anything, but an important part of life. If you don't eat omelets, you understand what I'm saying. Learning how to do things for yourself, by yourself, is a part of life. And if everything is easy all the time, you're just like a little potato that's being tossed around the world. And, oh, this potato needs a little bit of water. This potato needs that. And you're not actually doing anything for yourself. You're just like there. And I don't think that's living. So I think it can be easy to get comfortable, especially if you live in America. There's a solid middle class. There's this way where you can get into a routine where you go and work the same job every single day, and all of a sudden it's been 5 years. You live in the same place. You go home and you watch TV every night. You don't really do anything else, which is fine. That's a good life. But your life should be a little hard sometimes, because the hard stuff is what makes you better. There's this cheesy graphic, okay, and I'm familiar with it because I was a chronic user of Pinterest and still am, and so I feel like I've seen every single remotely artsy poetry graphic. And there's this graphic, I wouldn't necessarily call it poetry, but it's just a circle right here. It's supposed to be like a graph, but it's a full circle. It's all colored in. And that circle is your comfort zone, and then there's a little dot over here, and there's a line, and it's like where the magic happens. So it's saying, here's your comfort zone, and this is where the magic happens. I know it's cheesy. Sometimes where there's cheese, there's good stuff, like pizza, right? So I do think that's true. I think it's hard. It's hard. Even right now, I feel comfortable in the sense, like, I'm really lucky that a lot of my friends live where I am. In a weird turn of events, when I moved here, they were not all here. When I moved here, only two of my friends were here. And like, in a weird turn of events, 3 more of my friends have moved here. Close friends too. And so I'm really lucky. I live near 6 of my closest friends from my life growing up through college. And then through them, I've made a bunch more friends. So I like easily have 20 people in this area that I could call and see at any given time, which is such a blessing. And I find myself thinking about what would happen if I moved somewhere else. Not because I want to leave them. I'm so lucky, and I know in my heart that this is probably the last time I'll ever live near that many of my friends. That makes me deeply sad. I don't even want to talk about it. But right out of college, I went and I studied at Oxford, and I didn't know anybody, and I made tons of friends. I had a great time. And then right after that, I moved to California. I'd never even been to the state of California, and I was given friends because I was in a fellowship that had a bunch of other girls. But I made wonderful friends who I still talk to today. And then I just had these period where I was like on my own and I made it work, and I was on my own and I made it work. And so I'm wondering right now, am I just comfortable with my friends here? And should I be forcing myself into the unknown, or am I giving up a good thing too soon? And I think there's a fine line between that. And I have been one to self-sabotage. So we're not trying to do that or anything. But I think it's something you have to ask yourself. Am I doing this because I love it, because I want to, or just because I'm comfortable? And they say there's this thing where when you're comfortable, you don't necessarily do as well. For example, they always said in my SAT tutor class that you should not show up to take your SAT in pajamas or in sweatpants. You should not just roll out of bed and get in the car, even though it's going to be early and it's going to be a long day and no one's watching you to see what you look like. You shouldn't do that because you perform better when you're dressed. And this is entirely true for me. My coworkers always, every day when I walk in, say something about my outfit. They're so sweet. And I tell them, literally, guys, I could not show up here today if I wasn't dressed. I cannot leave the house. I love putting on clothes and it makes me want to do better and be more successful. And I do think there's something true about that. When you're super comfortable, you're not as on. You're not like, okay, we're doing this. And even something as small as clothes, like putting on the clothes that are just not quite as comfortable. They don't have to be uncomfortable. It's not like I want you to go and put on a bunch of scratchy wool sweaters or something like that, or linen pants in a super cold room. We're not doing that. But just putting a little bit of effort into things and making it so it's not super easy all the time, that's actually what shapes you into being a good person. And who wants to wear sweats all the time? So I think a little bit of challenge is good, and it's good to be a little scared sometimes because it means that you're living and you're alive. But I may be wrong. Thanks so much for listening. My name is Caroline Mae Whitson. I'll talk to you next week.